It's Barry Upton here in Seminyak, Bali, at the home of this man here, Mr. Steve Lillywhite, who is a total legend as far as music is concerned. And you even got a C.B.E, is that right?
I am a commander. I'm a commander of the British Empire. Yes.
And how does it feel to be that royal?
It was great. It was a great day out. You have a whole day at the palace, and you're allowed either 3 or 4 guests. Anyway, I took my mum and 2 of my kids, 3 guests, which was great. And it's a whole day there. And I was lucky. I had the Queen do it. Sometimes the Queen doesn't do it, and Charles does it. But the Queen doesn't do it at all anymore. But when I did it, the Queen did it.
And was she aware of all your hits?
She was. Funnily enough, people said, "What did she talk about?" I have no idea. I can't remember.
It all happened so. It was like a blur,
it was like a blur, but there was an orchestra playing and in background music.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was everyone from MBEs, OBEs, CBEs, nights.
Yeah.
They were all done throughout the day. So it's a long day for the Queen, but apparently it's one of those things she really likes doing.
Yeah. What would have been nice would have been like a fanfare tribute to some of your biggest,
Yeah, that would have been good. Have the band play a Psychedelic Furs song or something like that. Would have been great.
Okay, so now let's talk about trophies, because you got some Grammys, right?
I think I have 6 Grammy Awards, although one of them got broken on the trip over here from New York the other day. So, yes, 6 Grammy Awards, which includes the very prestigious Producer of the Year, non-classical, which really annoyed me.
Some of us can only dream about.
Why does it say non-classical? Why doesn't it say Producer of the Year? And then the classical one should say Producer of the Year Classical.
I would be even more impressed if it said non-cheesy.
Oh, yes.
Because you based your career on doing what I do, you try not to do, right?
I suppose in broad strokes, I think you could say that. But it was never, I never hated you then.
Not as much as now.
Not as much as now that I know you.
There you go, and you know even more of the cheesy ones that I produced.
Yes.
But you've been Mr. Cool all your life, haven't you? All your career.
And I've never thought of myself as being cool. No, never have.
But you can't get away from the fact that the records that you produce are cool.
Yeah, I've worked with some good people. I had a certain criteria of who I wanted to work with, and it coincided with what I liked.
Yeah.
I mean, it was never a case of thinking, am I cool or am I not? I never thought I was cool, because you cannot be cool with a name like Lillywhite. So I started off from what I considered an uncool place.
Right, okay. But how did you get into it in the first place? Did you have a dream of working in studios, or did it just happen?
Fear has always, it's been a fear of flipping burgers. And I was lucky enough to get a job in a studio.
Yeah.
And from then on, it was like, I like this.
But how did you get that job in the studio?
It was a mixture of someone my dad knew, who knew someone who ran the record pressing plant in Walthamstow for Philips. Anyway, and we thought it would, and because I wanted to be in the music business, that was the best my dad could do to help me. So we went to see the pressing plant in Walthamstow, where they were going like this for singles, and I didn't really know anything, and I said, have you got any jobs going?
Yeah.
And they looked at me and said, well, this isn't really the music business, because they could be baked beans. It really doesn't matter.
It's just product.
It's just product. He said, but we actually do have the recording studio in Marble Arch. I'll arrange for you to go and have a look at that.
Right.
So I went with my dad to go and have a look at the recording studio the following week, and it just so happened that the day I went to have a look around the studio, one of the assistants decided to leave.
Oh, timing. It's all about timing.
So instead of them going through all those, things, he said, I'll give you an interview.
Right.
And it was fantastic. He was a lovely man, and he was.
And you started as a tape op, right?
I started as a T-boy and a tape op. Yes.
There you go. And how did you progress to becoming the producer? I mean, I know you learn from being a tape op. You watch. And
you watch
learn.
and you learn and you make mistakes, but only one big mistake, but that's for another time. And then at weekends I was allowed to take my own artists in so I could learn how to engineer, which was the next level up from tape op. And I went in and took a band called, they were called Tiger Lily at the time, but they changed their name to Ultravox when I was doing the demos. And this was a version of Ultravox that had a different singer. Okay. It was quite weird that everyone knows Ultravox with Midge as the singer.
Yeah.
But this was before Midge joined, and they were like a punky Roxy music, and they were very liked by the music press actually. And I did their demos. They asked me to do their first album, and then from that, it wasn't a hit, but it was well reviewed. And then my roommate knew a guy called Johnny Thunders who, anyway, there was a lot of series of coincidences, and it got to be that I was asked to produce the first single for a band called Susie and the Banshees. Now,
Hong Kong Garden.
Hong Kong Garden. This was at a time when everyone who was in the know about punk rock knew that whatever Susie and the Banshees released would be a hit.
Oh, wow.
Because they'd been on TV with the Sex Pistols on Bill Grundy,
Yeah.
the famous TV show.
And she had the image.
She had the image. She'd been all in the music papers, which I scoured every week. You know, so, but they had a clause in their contract that said that if the band didn't like the record that they made, they had complete artistic control.
Okay.
So they'd already recorded Hong Kong Garden, but they didn't like the version that was finished with some American producer.
What did you do to make it better?
I'd never heard the original.
Oh.
I never heard it. I don't think it was ever even released. I don't know. I went in the studio and I thought, if I can make a version of this song that the band like and that I like, then I'll have a hit.
And that was the version that
everybody knows.
Yeah.
So yes, the band did like it, and that sort of became my way of my
calling card.
My calling card, because I was the guy who did great records with great bands.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. And so then the phone kept ringing, and you were going no.
I was always in my whole career until about 10 years ago. I always had far more work offered to me than I could do.
Yeah.
You know, there was always 10 for every one that I did.
And did you appreciate that? Did you understand how important?
No. You know, the harder you work, the luckier you get.
I've said that a million times.
which is a great saying.
It is.
You know, because I don't believe in karma. I don't believe in angels and gods and all that stuff. But I do believe that if you keep knocking on the door, eventually someone will answer it.
Yeah,
you know, and I was working all the time. You know,
and also if you keep doing what you believe is right.
Yeah. It was a very fertile ground at that time for music, because when we came up in music, it was when technology was being invented, and with the invention of technology comes the destruction of the technology for the form of the art. And that is where you get that sweet spot.
Sure. Yeah. And then you did Peter Gabriel.
Yeah, I was.
I'm very impressed with that.
Yeah, well, that was very lucky, because I'd already.
Games Without Frontiers was a fantastic record.
Well, it was a great team, and Peter just allowed us to do whatever we wanted. You know, it was much more like a school project than it was we're making a record. It was fantastic. And now, weirdly, I'm 5 years younger than Peter Gabriel, and I really felt that 5 years, you know, with him. Now, weirdly, when I then went to work with U2, I'm 5 years older than them. Now, I didn't feel 5 years older than them. I felt equal to them, but they always looked at me as being 5 years senior.
Oh, wise man.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, stupid, I know, but that's what they thought.
But in that case, that gives you a little bit of leeway to sort of say to them, well, why don't we try this? Why don't we try that? And they will respect that.
Well, they did respect it, but I was always a great one for steering an album, you know, and they were albums. That's what I did. I did albums in those days, and it's so many people in those days. You'd bump into them and go, they'd be like a week into recording their album, and you say, "How's your album going?" They go, "Oh, it sounds fucking great." You know, some of those don't even get released. Something along that line, along that road, something goes wrong, and my job was to stop it going wrong, and it was to keep it getting better. Now that sounds stupid.
And was it also to make the tracks sound like they had a purpose together?
As an album, a little bit, but time had a lot to do with that, because you would do backing tracks quite quickly, and I, you know, mostly I worked with bands who had the basic core to their sound.
Yeah.
So what we were doing was recording the band, but sometimes I would record the band in different ways because I felt it would sound better if I recorded them in different ways. And you know, I never had any rules as to how I would do it. I just had instinct.
Well, there's the first rule of production.
Yeah.
There's no rules.
Right, I know.
And then so from U2, you had all these other bands calling you, and
Yeah, but it wasn't only
You were the go-to
before
producer,
U2. I produced Joan Armour Trading and Psychedelic Furs and Susie and the Banshees and XTC and the Members. Those are the ones I had hits with, and I can't remember, and some others that I don't think I did have hits with. But but then U2 came along, and I did basically, remember, I did 3 albums before they had a hit.
right.
You know, but they were
It
building.
was different in those days, wasn't it?
It was different in those days. They were
the record
building
company
up.
would give you that leeway.
Yeah, they did, and not every band, but if they liked the band, they would.
If
And
they could see that there was a future.
a future, yes. And then, you know, it was XTC, and then it was U2 and like Simple Minds and Big Country, all these rock records, and culminating in the Rolling Stones, which was,
I mean, come
you know,
on.
who wouldn't want to produce?
Come on.
A real man doesn't say no to
No.
producing the Rolling Stones, Barry.
That's amazing.
A real man
I
doesn't
think-
say no to producing the Rolling Stones.
I mean, let's face it, U2 were one of the biggest rock bands in the world, but the Rolling Stones are legendary.
A legendary band, yeah, exactly. And I always say I produced the worst ever Rolling Stones album until the next one.
But it must have been, how did it feel working with those guys when you kind of grown up with them? Listening
Well,
to them?
I learned more from them than they learned from me, I think. It was a well-known album because Mick and Keith were not talking to each other more than about half an hour over 6 months. So it was, you know, it was really not very friendly, you know.
So
But
did you have to sort of be...
now, Mick and Keith have always had this thing. That's what makes it
Right.
good. And occasionally, you know, we had a song called One Hit to the Body that was, you know, that was okay. And the single was called Harlem Shuffle. But in general, it wasn't perfect.
But I've worked with
But it was good.
with acts that I grew up with and bought records from, and you don't know, you don't realise it at the time because you're so focused on what you're doing. But there's that little thing inside you that says, "Wow," you know.
Yeah.
And sure, you must have had a moment,
That it's a good record.
or that I'm working with
No.
guys that I
Oh,
admire
my childhood heroes. No, not really. It very soon it becomes, this is what I've got to do.
Okay.
You know, and yeah, I mean, I suppose if that was the case, what you're saying, I would have done my homework, and I would have gone to listen to lots of Rolling Stones albums before I worked with them,
Right.
to try and see what I would
Because
get, and I never
I've
did.
heard you say if you're producing a band, you like to go and see them live first.
Yeah, that's
You
much
think
more
that's important.
Yeah, it's really important for me to see a band live, because that way you're seeing them playing their music when they're not thinking. And when a musician is playing their music and they're not thinking, they're playing at their best.
Yeah.
When they're thinking about it, they tense up.
Yeah.
And you know, and especially when you're young, and in those days, a lot of young bands I was working with had never been in a studio. They may have been my age, but I'd been in studios for 5 years more than them. You know,
And did you try to get them to perform the way they would live in the studio?
if that was what was needed, yeah. And a lot of the times that was what we did.
Yeah.
And then I would use that as my base and then work away from that.
Yeah. So then after that, you did the Dave Matthews Band. You were playing me some tracks last night.
I was.
Because I wasn't that familiar, and anybody outside of the USA is not so familiar.
No,
with them.
they were, but they were
became
huge.
really big for you. Didn't
They were as big as anyone. Sold tens of millions of albums across the 4 I did with them, and it was great. It was that was a whole other lease of life. I mean, I went from punk rock to doing prog rock, and that led me to do lots of other things.
And did you study the American market? Because I mean,
no, this was nothing like.
So you just think, I'm going to make a good record. That's it.
Yeah, but I knew I wanted to do the band. They were a fantastic band, and they'd had lots of other producers turn them down, because at that time in 1997 I was at you go up and down in your career, and in 97 my marriage was falling apart. 95 it was 94 I did the first album. It was when I getting divorced from Kirsty. I was not happy, but we made great records and people loved them. But when I went to see the band, other producers had turned them down because I wasn't the top guy.
Okay.
What
did they see in you that made them want you?
My enthusiasm for the project. Absolutely. And the other producer that they'd agreed to do the album with was a guy called Jerry Harrison, who was the keyboard player of Talking Heads. Now, I'd produced the Talking Heads, and I remember going to a gig, seeing them in New York, and Jerry Harrison was at that gig. And I said, "Hi, Jerry, how you doing?" He goes, "Hi, Steve, great to see you." I said, "I know you think you're doing this band, but I'm sorry. I want to do this band." Yeah. And he goes, "Fair enough." I mean, he'd had some hits at that point. He was quite hot. Yeah. And my sheer will got me the job.
Now, you just said something there which I think is such an important word, enthusiasm.
Oh, yeah.
Because isn't that the case for nearly everything you do?
Of course it is. For me, it is.
To be successful.
You've got to... Look, there's a big difference between a vocation and a job. Right. A vocation is something that doesn't feel like work.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is, who doesn't want to earn money by not working? So a vocation could be fantastic.
Almost doing your hobby.
Yeah. Now, but one of the bad things about it being a vocation and not a job is that you're never allowed to complain about it, because you're only allowed to complain about a job.
Right.
You're never allowed to complain about your vocation, because that is something that inherently you always enjoy.
Yeah.
But a job, you're allowed to, and some people who have it's great to moan about their boss.
Right.
I can never moan about my boss.
No, but
Otherwise, I'm not being true to my vocation.
Oh, right.
And it's a vocation. Yeah. You understand that, right?
I totally understand it, and I think that's a very important thing. Actually, you come out with we do this thing called Jukebox Judgment, where
on newdawnfm.com.
This is how we got to know each other on there, and it was really funny because we're from different genres.
Completely.
We agree on so many different things.
Yeah.
Right?
We get on. Yeah.
But one of the things that one of the reasons I love doing it is because you never stop learning, and some of the little sayings that you come out with, right? I think are hilarious. Like the thing about the birds. I love that one about the birds. It's an analogy of birds swarming along together, and a band.
And a great band don't have to sort of. When you look at a swarm of birds, they don't all have little walkie-talkies that go, okay, 3, 2, 1, left a bit, and they all do it naturally. There's this natural thing, and with great music and great playing, it becomes a natural thing. Even with an orchestra, actually, even if they're all reading a score, but there's a flow in how they can work, or it can be choppy and horrible. But when it works, it's beautiful. And with rock music, which is what I love, when a band is playing and jamming and they just go and they flip it, and it's wonderful.
And the other thing which I find is very, very important, some of the times you say it, is about the vocal, which we know is almost the most important part of a record.
Yeah, the vocal is like a painting. And the vocal is the bowl of fruit at the front.
Right, yes.
Everything else behind
is dressing.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, you may obsess over a bass drum sound or something like that, but the public don't give a fuck about that. They know what they hear,
Yeah.
and they just listen to it. Now, maybe obsessing over that bass drum sound is a 1% of something that when you add up all the little obsessions, you get to the 100%. I get that. But yeah.
And also the fact that you have to give 100% in the vocal, and a lot of the times, a lot of the things that we listen to on Jukebox Judgment, it's not 100%, is it?
No, and
that's the one thing that can be improved.
It is, and why people want to release records when there's no point in releasing their record. Why don't you just never stop recording, but look for the magic. Yeah. And really analyze yourself and say, is this as good as my influences?
Yeah.
Really be honest with yourself and say, if say your favorite band is, I don't know, anywhere, and what you've done, compare it and say, no, it's not as good. Does it give me the same feeling?
That's the important thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Because it's not to do with copying a sound of your favourite band. It's the spirits, it's the essence of that music.
It's the feeling from the music that is what connects you to it.
Well, of course, There you go.
Very good.
A lot. I tell you, I have to stop unless you're paying me. Unless you're paying me. Thank you.
Checks in the post, right? I just want to say, this place, the LillyPad, is this your biggest trophy ever?
Yeah, it's throughout my life, I've never been that bothered where I live, and this is the one place that. Turn the camera around and show it.
Oh, well, yeah. Okay, let's have a look. Let's go like
this is my house.
There we go. Look at that. I mean, it is just amazing. I've stayed here with you the last few days, and I feel at home already. But it's great. I mean, I know you've only had it a short while.
Yeah, I've only lived here.
But it is.
6 months. Yeah.
I'm sitting in the pool and thinking, this is like a trophy
Yeah.
to my career, or not to my career, but to
Yeah,
your
yeah,
career.
yeah.
Isn't this fantastic?
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. All right, and enjoy it.
Good. They grow bigger, but if you don't feed them, feed them 4 times a day. I only feed them once a day.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Steve Lillywhite, and I'm a friend of Barry Upton's.
Is that a disclaimer?
Yes. So anything I say
Should not be taken into
down and
serious.
used as evidence against me.